Welcome back. This is our lecture video about supply. This one will be a little bit shorter than the last one, and then we'll have a third video where we talk about equilibrium, where we put supply and demand together. So in this case, supply means the sellers, the producers of the products, goods, or services. If we're talking about labor markets, the supply is going to be from households. You're going to sell your labor to the companies. I would say for most of the semester, we'll probably talk about things from the product side. So you could think of sellers as producers, manufacturers, retail stores, anyone you generally think of as a seller. Our supply curve can be a schedule, graph, or equation, just like with demand. So a schedule is another word for table, or something where we're just listing all of the points out. So price of $8, quantity supplied is 160, price of $4, quantity supplied is 80. So it just lists out all of those points. Our graph is down here. We've got price on the y-axis, quantity on the x-axis, and we've an upward sloping supply curve. Price and quantity are moving in the same direction. We also can have an equation. So quantity supplied is equal to 45 plus 8p. You could also have p on the other side. So p is equal to 72 plus 14 quantity supplied. And the important thing about all three of these is that we have an upward sloping supply curve. So in the equation, you see that as this plus here. On the graph, the line is moving up. So as price goes up, quantity goes up. And on the table, you could see that as price goes up, your quantity supplied is also going up as well. Suppliers have an upward sloping supply curve, represents their cost of production, their reservation price, which is the minimum that they're willing to sell. And so as prices increase, our suppliers are willing to produce a higher quantity, they're willing to sell a higher quantity. This is going to include things like opportunity costs, other things that they can produce, and we will get into all of that in a lot more detail later. The supply curve actually represents the marginal cost of production, and when we get into our cost curves chapter, we will talk a lot more about where that number comes from. We'll get average, total, variable, fixed costs. We'll get a whole bunch of stuff in there, but what we do want to remember is that this is like the extra cost to produce one more. So if you're thinking about like opportunity cost, time, maybe you have to pay your employees overtime to produce a little bit extra, it's going to be worth it if the price is higher. It's representing marginal cost. So if we look at a quantity of, just say this is 5 right here, a price of 5 and a quantity of 20, we would say that item number 20 cost $5 to produce. So if they're going to sell 20 of them, the price needs to be at least $5. Or if we're talking about a price of $8, quantity of 60, that means unit number 60 cost $8. Unit number 20 still costs $5. So if they can sell it for $8, that means on these earlier ones, they actually made a profit, right? They made more than what it cost them to produce. And we will definitely get into that a lot more later as well. It's their reservation price, their willingness to accept, and it's going to represent that lowest price they're willing to accept. As economists, this does include implicit cost, opportunity cost, the value of their time, what else they could be doing. Our law of supply says as the price rises, the quantity supplied rises as well. So we have upward slope moving in the same direction. Our buyers and sellers want different things. So buyers want prices to go down. Our sellers want those prices to go up. If we are talking about a price change, we're going to see that it gets us to a new point on this same line. So all of the other conditions of production and preferences and other options already exist in this line. And it says if price changes, what is going to happen to quantity supplied? So as price goes up, that quantity supplied is going to go up. We're going to move just to a new point on that same line. But what if something else changes? Something other than price, right? Something changes that's not price. Just like demand, we're going to get a shift in the supply curve. So that whole line can move to the right or to the left. Now, once we get into equilibrium, we'll talk about like why that shift can then cause a price change, but it's not something else had to change in the market. Okay, so let's look at some of those categories that will cause the supply curve to shift. So just like demand, an increase in supply is a shift to the right, and a decrease in supply is a shift to the left. So an increase in supply means that at every price level, people are willing to supply a higher quantity. And a decrease in supply means at every price level, people are willing to supply a lower quantity. So like if we start at point A, if we're talking about a price of $7, okay, an increase in supply means that we went from willing to supply 70 to 90, 120. Or a decrease in supply means that $7 now we're only willing to supply 30. So an increase or decrease in supply means that whole line is moving to the right or to the left. If you want to just talk about one point to another, price went up, then we would say quantity supplied changed. Okay, so quantity supplied is an actual number. It's a specific quantity. Supply is talking about this whole line. So the whole function of preferences for consumers. For sellers. Okay, so what's going to cause this to shift? So this is going to be different than the things that cause demand to shift, because these are going to be all things that affect production costs. Could be opportunity costs, other things like that, but think of things that change the cost of production. So input prices. So inputs, these are the factors of production. These are all of the things required to make something. So land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. So land, this is just any type of natural resource, any sort of materials. So let's say this is the market for tables. So some land resources could be wood, plastic, metal, talking about like screws, nails, other things, right? All the stuff you would use to actually make it, the materials you need. Labor, this is the human effort applied to production. So somebody actually assembling the tables. Land, labor, capital is going to be the tools. So the machinery, the factory that they use, the hammer they use to make the table, whatever. And then entrepreneurship. This is putting all those resources together to create a product. So if any of this stuff gets more expensive, okay, input prices go up. So let's say the cost of wood increases. So price of wood goes up 10%. This is an input to production, so input price goes up. This is going to shift supply to the left. So we're going to get a decrease in supply because now it's more expensive to produce my table. I'm going to have to spend more money for every single table, which means I am going to have a higher minimum price for every single quantity. Or the opposite is also true. So if input prices drop, all of a sudden wood becomes cheaper, we find a new source that's easier to produce, we'll get an increase in supply. Shift to the right. This is true for any of the inputs, so minimum wages go up or wages go up, it makes it more expensive. You may see a decrease in supply. Population increases, maybe that makes labor cheaper, increase in supply. So anything that affects that input price. Second is going to be technology. So technology here doesn't only mean like electronics. It's really anything that improves the production process. So it could be just like a shovel. Let's say I'm a farmer and I'm digging all the holes by hand and then putting one seed in each hole. I'm making corn. Now all of a sudden I have a shovel. That shovel is technology. I'm going to be able to dig those holes much faster with a shovel than just by hand. And if I get a tractor, I'm going to be able to do it even faster. Technology could be computers, electronics, software, but just anything that improves the production process. So if we have an increase in technology, that means technology got better, we have more of it available, it's more efficient, more effective. So an increase in technology is going to increase supply. If we have a decrease in technology, that's going to decrease supply. Decrease in technology can happen. It could be certain rules and regulations that make certain equipment or things no longer allowed. There could be natural disasters that actually destroy infrastructure and factories that make it go down. So anytime you have less technology or worse technology, it's going to decrease supply. It's going to make it more expensive to produce things. Substitutes in production. Okay, so let's say this is my market for tables, but I could also make chairs. Chairs and tables could be substitutes in production. I may use a lot of the same materials and tools. The people that work for me who can build tables can also build chairs. Let's say all of a sudden something crazy goes on in the chair market and we have a huge price increase in chairs. Okay. In this case, when I say the price for chairs goes up, I don't mean the cost of producing chairs. I mean that the price customers are willing to pay for chairs goes up, right? Or we'll get to equilibrium in our next video, but basically the selling price, right? The selling price goes up. So selling price goes up for chairs. I am going to want to make less tables because I now want to devote more of my resources to chairs. So if the price of chairs goes up, I am going to decrease my supply of tables today. I want to use my resources in something else, in a different market that I can produce in. We saw this a lot during COVID. Clothing companies, they're like, well, people aren't buying as many clothes because they're not going anywhere, so let's shift our resources and turn this into masks. Weather also has a big impact on supply. So you can think of this like for agricultural markets, if you're dependent on rain and weather for how much crops you can grow. Bad weather is going to decrease supply. Good weather is going to increase supply. It also applies to other markets as well, though, especially because of how globalized we are and most things are not produced locally. You buy stuff, it's made halfway across the world or across the country. It has to get shipped in, transported in. And so weather really does affect those shipping costs and transportation costs. And so good weather means it's cheaper to sell stuff and make it and transport it, and bad weather means it's worse. And you can think of this too, like you're making something and you have to import some of your parts from somewhere else. So I'm making tables and I have to buy some of the wood from one part of the country, and I have to buy like the tools and materials from a different part of the country. So if I'm buying it from somewhere with bad weather, it might be more expensive or harder to get that stuff to me, which is going to increase my cost of production. The number of suppliers also matters. So as people enter and exit the market, it's going to shift that supply curve to the right or left. So if we have more suppliers, more people entering the market, it's going to shift to the right. So we've got more sellers. And if we have people exiting the market, we're going to have less sellers, right? Less suppliers. That's going to be a shift to the left. So exit and enter. And we're going to get more into that in our cost curves chapter. And then seller expectations of future prices also matter. So let's say this is still my market for tables. This is going to represent what's happening in my market for tables today. So I think next month, people are going to want to buy a bunch of new tables. Maybe November. It's going to be Thanksgiving soon. And people are going to have families over. They're going to realize they need a bigger table. And they're going to need it right away. It's going to be last minute. So I think prices are going to go up in the future. I think prices of tables are going to go up next month. So if I think I'm going to make more money next month, I might decrease my supply of tables today. I am not going to have as many tables for sale right now. I want to save them and have them ready for November when I know there's going to be a lot more people buying. Or let's say I sell bathing suits and it's the end of summer, so I expect prices to drop. I think, in the winter, no one's going to buy bathing suits. I'm going to try to increase my supply today. I want to try to sell it right now while we're getting close to the end of summer. Maybe people are still swimming. It's 100 degrees out. I don't want to have that supply in the future when prices are going to drop. So if we see a change in supply, an increase or decrease in supply, something on this list needs to change. Okay? So if the only thing we know is that the price changed, we're going to say that it's a movement along the same curve. So price changed, all I can say is I know is that quantity supplied changed. If weather changed, input prices, expectations of future prices, any of that changes, then I can say we have a shift in the market. And so this is going to be something we really want to pay attention to, especially because when you're looking at like the news, the media, the way people talk about this in everyday life, they don't distinguish between supply and quantity supplied, or they don't distinguish between demand and quantity demanded. The news will always just say demand went up, supply went down, and you don't know if it's just, oh, it was a price change or what things shifted. So if we say change in demand, that means the whole curve moved to the left or the right. The whole thing shifted. If we say change in quantity demand, it just means we went from one point to another point on the same line. Same thing with supply. Change in supply, the whole line is moving left or right. Change in quantity supplied, we're just moving from one point to another on the same curve.